Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking into a pretty fascinating paradox for you. So, India is sitting on, well, a massive 400 billion tons of coal reserves.
Mm,
Is one of the most resource-rich nations on the planet.
right, yeah.
But despite all that, the country just spent nearly 2.77 lakh crore rupees last year. And that was just importing critical industrial inputs like crude oil, LNG, ammonia, and methanol. So, why are we doing this?
Yeah, it is a huge structural vulnerability. I mean, having the raw material in the ground doesn't mean much if it is not in the chemical format your industry actually needs.
Exactly, which is what we want to explore for you today. How do you take a basic combustion fuel and engineer it into a high-value industrial asset?
Right, and that disconnect between what is in the ground and what the industry needs is forcing a major strategic pivot. We are moving from just broad extraction to a very specific chemical intervention, which is coal gasification.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of that because, we aren't just talking about throwing more coal into a giant furnace, right? How does gasification actually alter that chemical format?
Well, it is completely different from traditional combustion. Instead of burning the coal outright, you place it in a heavily controlled environment.
Okay,
You expose it to extreme heat, but, and here's the key, you strictly limit the oxygen and introduce steam.
so it cannot burn completely.
Exactly. Because it cannot burn completely, this intense heat and pressure force a chemical phase change. The solid coal breaks down into a gaseous fuel called syngas.
Syngas.
Right, which is primarily carbon monoxide and hydrogen.
So just so I am understanding, it is less like tossing logs in a fireplace and, more like using an industrial pressure cooker?
Yeah, that is a really good way to look at
If
it.
you're using extreme heat and pressure in a closed loop to force the material to release its embedded chemical value rather than just, releasing thermal energy to heat something up. Or I guess like milling timber to make high-value furniture instead of just burning it for a campfire.
That is exactly the mechanism. And that syngas, it is the foundational building block for things like fertilizers, synthetic natural gas, and specialized inputs for the steel sector.
Which brings us right back to that massive 2.77 lakh crore rupee import bill we mentioned at the start.
Right.
Because if Syngas can create those exact inputs domestically, well, that explains why we are seeing such aggressive financial policies rolling out to support it.
It really does. I mean, the global market for these gasified chemicals is already huge. It is somewhere between 40 and $45 billion right now.
Wow, that is massive.
Yeah, and China is currently dominating that production. So India wants to build a similar integrated ecosystem, and they're aiming for 100 million tons of capacity by 2030.
But building these facilities has to be incredibly capital intensive, right?
Oh, absolutely. That is the crux of it. The private sector just isn't going to jump in without some serious de-risking from the government.
So that is where the state steps in.
Right. That is why the government just approved a 37,500 crore rupee scheme.
Okay, how does that work financially?
Well, they're covering up to 20% of plant and machinery costs, and that is capped at 5,000 crore rupees per project.
Got it. So the state is absorbing enough of that upfront capital risk to actually make these projects viable for private balance sheets.
Exactly.
But wait, if we are rapidly scaling up to 100 million tons of capacity, doesn't that just mean we will be digging more giant open pit mines to feed these new plants? Because from a land use perspective, for a listener, that might seem like a huge step backward.
Yeah, that is a very valid concern. And it is actually why the technological execution is shifting. We are seeing a major pivot toward underground coal gasification, or UCG.
UCG?
Right. In fact, 4 coal mines were recently awarded with embedded UCG provisions, which is really a first-of-its-kind move.
Where? How do you gasify coal while it's still buried hundreds of feet underground?
It is a fascinating engineering process, honestly. Instead of mining the coal and bringing it up to a surface plant, you drill injection and production wells directly down into the coal seam.
Oh, wow. So you just do it down there?
Yeah. You pump in the steam and controlled oxygen, ignite the seam underground, and the gasification happens right there in the earth.
That is wild.
Yeah, and then you just extract the resulting syngas up through the production well.
So you bypass traditional extraction entirely. It's basically in situ resource conversion.
Precisely. And this shift from physical extraction to in situ conversion, it represents a major evolution in supply chain security.
And economic resilience,
Yeah.
right? So if you are looking at how this impacts the broader economy, it is
Or-
pretty clear this isn't just a standard energy sector update.
No, not at all.
It is about fundamentally rewriting industrial supply chains. But we do have a massive elephant in the room here.
The emissions.
Right. Gasification is highly carbon intensive.
It is. There is no getting around that. And the reality is that gasification operates as a transition tool.
Right.
Its long-term viability is going to absolutely hinge on integrating carbon capture technologies at these facilities. We have to balance this drive for economic security with climate sustainability.
We have to figure out how to synthesize these chemicals without the emissions profile just, completely outweighing the economic benefit.
Exactly.
Which leaves you with a really interesting thought to ponder. If large economies do manage to successfully synthesize their own oil and gas substitutes from domestic coal using these methods, well, it makes you wonder how that kind of energy self-reliance might eventually rewrite the global geopolitical alliances that are currently dominated by petrostates.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.